Welcome everybody. I'm happy today to talk to you about ecosystem services in Myanmar's frontier landscape and particularly in community forests in the frame of this Jekini annual event ahead of the UN Food Systems Summit. So let's go straight to this frontier landscape where I worked. What is happening here? So the landscape is here in Myanmar south. It is bordering Thailand on the east and the Andaman Sea on the west. It is quite forested still, this area, so it's a borderland. It's quite hilly and much of the area looks like this, so it's still quite forested. However, there are many land use changes ongoing, especially in the past few years. So on the one hand, we have changes to agriculture. That includes, on top, mixed plantations, mainly for smallholders. They include crops like cashew nut and betel nut, and also some annual crops planted in between. Then we have rubber plantations that have been expanded in the past around 10-12 years, but mainly from private investors and also smallholders. On the other hand, there are also concessions that have been given out to companies in the past 20 years to establish particularly oil palm, with the idea to supply palm oil for the population of Myanmar. On the other hand, the forests are also directly used, for example, by local communities in the more distant areas for shifting cultivation, also collection of non-timber forest products, and more recently, community forestry. So in community forestry, that goes back to the community forestry instruction from 1995. And in community forestry, what it means is that communities receive for a certain area of forest the right to use it collectively, or at least as a community they receive a certificate to use it, manage it for 30 years. And they also have to plan with or prepare a management plan. So we'll talk about this later, what it means for ecosystem services. First, just briefly to show you where this research is embedded. So this is research from my PhD with the aim to assess ecosystem services specifically for local communities under different land uses and tenure systems in this Tanintharyi region. The PhD was linked to two projects carried out by CDE from the University of Bern. One of the projects financed by SNF is called Managing Telecoupled Landscapes, just finished. It had the aim to look at different strategies to have better ecosystem services and increase human well-being. And it worked on 3 different frontier landscapes in 3 different countries, including Myanmar. The second project is the One Map Myanmar project, currently still ongoing, that aim to improve the availability and also the quality of data on land use and land tenure in the entire Myanmar. So it established a countrywide platform. So this is where my PhD was embedded. In terms of methodology, I combined different methods, including more participatory research methods, like here you see different types of focus group discussions, also including mapping and other exercises with local communities across the Tanintharyi region. I also did several transect walks that you see here, going through villages, farmers' fields, looking at different plantations and crops, but then also looking at the forests, walking in the community forests, and also protected areas. And then, of course, this was accompanied by several interviews with land users on the one hand, but also experts, meaning representatives from research institutions, government institutions, non-governmental organizations, etc. I combined this more qualitative data with secondary data that was available for Thani Daru region. This included several spatial data, like the distribution of different zones, like protected areas, concession areas, and also community forestry areas. And also census data from 2015, from the National Census. Combining these different data now, I prepared models for a total of 9 ecosystem services to model and map these for the region. This allowed us then finally to say, this is the example of fieldwood, to say what do we have on the supply side, where in the Daru region is there a high supply of fieldwood, how is the demand, depending on population density, but also their use of certain products and services, and their including intrinsic values as well. And even the ecosystem service flows, which means whether local people actually have access to these services. So here you can see the map with the land uses and also the zonings. So you can see all these green parts is mainly forests, also including degraded forest areas. Then we have mangroves along the coast. And everywhere here between we have the agricultural lands, the plantations. This here shows the oil palm concessions, so they're mainly in the south. This here is a protected area. Community forestry areas, you cannot see that well because they're quite small, so on this map you cannot see, but for example, all along this protected area there are smaller community forestry zones. So using this data and our models, we looked at the balance between the supply and the demand of ecosystem services. We will look at a couple of them now. So first, the subsistence foods was one ecosystem service we looked at, and we found that the supply in most areas is a bit lower than what is actually demanded. I mean, this is not surprising because people also started buying a lot of food, especially rice, on the market. But still there are limitations here where the demand is higher in these border areas that are still forested. So there are not many people living there, but still they don't produce that much of rice, only some from shifting cultivation. Then also in these hotspots, like in the Dawei, Meg and Kaldang, the cities, there of course the supply is much lower than what is demanded from the people. The medicinal plants is a good example of a forest-related ecosystem service that is very highly provided and not a problem for local people who need it. The highest or most of the problems exist here, as you can see. It's very red, so it means that demand is much higher than the supply. So for environmental education, which means trainings like agricultural extension, but also trainings on forest management, use of forest products, etc. That's something that local communities really need and ask for, but it's not provided. It's not really provided by the government institutions, and just to some extent by NGOs or even companies. That's why, for example, in this protected area, the supply is higher because they do give trainings on forests, for example. So let's zoom in a bit to one smaller area, which is up here in the very north, and it's very one of the main areas of development. What you can see here in terms of land use, so these are all degraded forests in light green. Then there's a settlement in the middle of it, village, and around it in orange a lot of plantations. Orange is rubber plantations, but also mixed plantations here in brown. On the right side here we have the protected area. And then, as I said before, the community forests surrounding it. So here with the dots, these are community forests. And on this side, there's a smaller oil palm concession as well. So what does it mean for ecosystem service mismatches? So how many ecosystem services are not provided to the amount that they are actually needed? So we looked at a total of 9 services, as I said, and we found that most of these mismatches or imbalances are, of course, in the settlement here, as there are not many services provided in the village, but also in the concession areas. This is quite important because local people, they do not have access to the concession lands. It's owned by private companies, they engage workers from abroad, and so on. And important here is that community forests, as you see, they actually provide no negative supply versus demand. So that means the community forests, they're quite balanced in what they provide for the communities and what communities ask for from these areas. Even more so than protected areas, because protected areas have more restrictions like no collection of fuel wood, etc. We also looked at it in a bit a different way with scenarios. We found that in a common forested landscape that we have here, that as you see in the mean of the 9 services, it actually increases if we establish community forestry. That's mainly because the services are a bit more balanced, except for here commercial products that are still too limited in community forestry, so that's a potential for improvement. However, environmental education that you saw before is quite lacking, so this one we can really increase with community forests because it comes with NGOs and also government agencies working with people to manage forests. And for agriculture, it's rather decreasing their services, especially for oil palm concessions. So to finish up, as an outlook, we saw from this research that community forestry is really one of the opportunities. I'm not saying the only opportunity, but it's one good opportunity to reduce trade-offs between different ecosystem services because they're quite balanced. With this research, we also added the local perspective to the global perspective that we're used to, like especially carbon sequestration, climate change mitigation, but also biodiversity are like the ecosystem services that are mostly talked about at the global level. So we added the local perspectives, and the scenarios and the maps that we produce, they can directly be used. They can better visualize what is happening with certain policy decisions. So that can help. Specifically, in the frame of the topic today, for food security, what we found is that local land uses, they still rely on traditional land uses as a safety net. So here we talk about shifting cultivation, but they also still ask for medicinal plants as a safety net, for example. That doesn't mean they're not interested in new crops, but it's just that they prefer to have both, to keep some traditional land uses and add new crops with more commercial values. The other side, climate change. In terms of the local perspective, we saw that for them, even though they're very aware of climate change and they're worried about it, but what they mainly see directly is microclimate from different land uses. Like they even like rubber plantations because they give more shade and a better temperature. So this is something that should be regarded when taking rather top-down policy decisions. And also, if there's activities to mitigate climate change, we need to be aware that there should be synergies also with other ecosystem services, like what is provided in community forests. Yes, so that was my part. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, this is a recorded version of my presentation on 15th June. Unfortunately, something went wrong with the live recording that day, so I'm doing it once again for you, and if you find some glitches or inconsistencies, please pardon me. Now, before starting this presentation, I want to give a disclaimer that this work is done by a large team of researchers from FIBL and from the partner institutions in Kenya, India, and Bolivia. So I was part of this team for nearly 8 years. And today I have the opportunity to share the results with you. But the work it belongs to a big team. It's a long-term work started in 2007, so many people have been associated during these years with this work. Now, when it comes to comparing organic and conventional production systems, we know that there is quite some evidence available from the temperate environments and from the developed countries, but there is very little evidence available from the countries in the tropics. So this program was initiated by FIBL in 2007, which gives quite a good evidence that I will share with you today. Now we know that the agricultural system globally is facing a number of challenges, but the challenges in the tropics are even more pronounced. For example, the population growth is at a tremendous pace, and it is estimated that by the middle of the century, more than half of the world's population will be living in the tropics. And that is leading to fast urbanization with an increasing gap between rich and poor, with the development of large areas of slums. And we know that the climatic extremes are even more pronounced in the tropics. So there will be more drought incidences, there will be more flood incidences, and the farmers in the tropics are mostly smallholders, so they have very little means to battle against these extremes, and with their specific conditions, a customized approach need to be developed for their well-being and for the sustainability of the production systems in the tropics. So the policymakers in these developing tropical countries, they are posed with these challenges of, on the one hand, to maintain or to increase the economic growth, at the same time to balance it with sustainable options. So for the to find if certain kind of production systems are more useful in the tropical conditions or not, this SISCOM program is working in Kenya, India, and Bolivia. So the whole idea is to compare organic production systems with conventional systems with the local crops, but there are some regional differences among the three country projects. So in Kenya, we have maize-based production system with 3-year crop rotation, which includes also vegetables, potatoes, and beans. In India, it's a cotton-based production system where cotton is the main cash crop, wheat is the main staple crop, and a legume, which is soybean. So it's a 2-year crop rotation with cotton, soybean, and wheat in the central India. And then in Bolivia, we have agroforestry and monocultures in cacao systems. Cacao uh, intercropped with plantain, coffee, timber trees, and other shade-giving trees. And whereas on the other hand, it's also monoculture. Both are in conventional as well as organic production. Now today, we will be mainly focusing on India, given the time constraints. Now here is the trial in the central Indian state of Madhya Pradesh. We are testing 4 production systems. One is the uh, BT conventional cotton system, so where the cotton crop is a GMO, BT cotton, and then there is conventional without BT cotton, there is organic, there is biodynamic. And here on this picture, you see the middle row that is planted with cotton. On the left side is soybean. The soybean will be followed by wheat, and the next year the rows will be swapped. So we have all the crops in all the years. Now here is the productivity data, the yield data from 2007 to 2014. So you see that cotton and wheat, there is a yield gap between organic and conventional systems. So the green bars are biodynamic and organic. The orange is conventional without BT. The red one is BT conventional. So we see that in for the legume crop, the soybean, there is no yield gap. The yield in all the years was consistently equal across all the systems. Um, but in cotton and wheat, we see that the yield gap is primarily coming from lower nitrogen. It must also be noted that the nitrogen inputs in organic systems are much lower by design. So the nitrogen for conventional cotton is 100 kg, conventional BT is recommended at 120 kg, whereas for organic systems, it's only 80 kg. So with that lower nitrogen and with lower other, in the absence of synthetic inputs, organic systems are producing lower than conventional on an average. Now, if we see the yield development of cotton throughout all the years, this yield gap was not in all the years. It varied. So there were some years where BT cotton or conventional cotton performed significantly higher, while there were other years where there was no difference, or in some years even organic was slightly higher. So classical example of where BT cotton offers its advantage is the year 2013. You see, there is the conventional cotton performed equivalent to organic, while the BT cotton had high yield. So this might be a year of high pest attack, heavy attack of cotton bollworm, against which BT gene is effective. But this advantage is not consistent. So there are only few years where BT cotton offers a certain advantage, but on the average, there is a 20% higher yield of conventional systems to that of organic systems. Now, this is the case on the research station, where all the production systems are very well controlled and are managed to the best possible extent. Whereas we did a survey in 2014, a farm survey in the region, and there we found that the organic and conventional farmers, they were producing almost equivalently. So there were organic farmers who were producing really good yields comparable to good conventional farms, whereas there were also some conventional farms which were producing poorly. compared to the equivalent to the poor organic farms. So we think we conclude from these results that the efficiency, the technical efficiency of management on the farm is far more important in determining the yield, the attainable yield on these farms, or the yield attained on these farms, I would say. Now, when we compare the economics, the profitability of the organic and conventional systems, on the left side, the orange bars show that the return on labor hours is much lower in organic systems. So on the one hand, there is a higher input of labor because of the preparation of compost and manures and hand weeding, things like that. Uh, at the same time, the yield is lower, so the returns on labor are higher in conventional and conventional BT and lower in organic. But the middle and the blue bars, they show the return on input costs. So there are very little market purchased inputs used in organic systems. Hence, the input costs are lower. So the return on every dollar invested is much higher in organic systems compared to conventional or BT conventional systems. When we combine both the labor input and the capital inputs and then calculate a benefit to cost ratio, we see that the benefit to cost ratio is equal across organic, conventional, BT conventional systems. On the right side, the green bars. So this is very important for the smallholder farmers who do not have a lot of capital to invest. So imagine if they borrow all that capital to buy the expensive BT seeds and all the other market purchase inputs, and on top of that they borrow this money and they pay interest on that. Then it's not a very profitable proposition because they carry all the risk of the crop failure. And on the other hand, the organic production systems, um, they might not be producing the highest yields or not be bringing the highest financial returns, but they provide a good benefit cost ratio, and they offer a suitable choice to the poor smallholder farmers. On top of that, the here it's a research trial, and we have calculated every hour of the labor invested. If you imagine that a smallholder family farmer has sufficient family labor available, so then he rather takes it as an opportunity of employment, so that the costs for that labor are saved, or you can say that is an earning for the farming family. So hence, organic production systems offer a reasonable choice for the capital poor farmers. Other services, we saw the soil organic carbon. So the organic systems, they increased soil organic carbon, although it's a very little increase in these 7 years. One thing to mention is that in this region, conventional farmers, they also use organic manures every second year or so. So following the local practices, in this study, we also supply every second year organic manures to the conventional systems. But that's, of course, the input is much lower than the organic systems. The other thing we observed was the biodiversity. So the earthworms, their population density is much higher in organic systems throughout the cropping season compared to the conventional systems. So the soils are more live. In another PhD study, we saw that because of this biological activity in the soils, the phosphorus availability in all the systems was equal. So organic systems, though there were no synthetic phosphorus inputs, there was this rock phosphate mixed with compost that was supplied, but because of the biological activity, the availability remains the same. Based on, these are the results from these comparisons. At the same time, in this location, we have a very advanced system of participatory on-farm research. Christoph has been there; he saw it work. So the participatory on-farm research is focusing on the development of solutions with locally available inputs, with local knowledge, and there we develop solutions, for example, for the botanical preparations for pest control, and there we have quite good involvement of local farmers. At the moment, there is also a breeding program running in India with participation, which has its roots in the SysCom program. With that, I would like to conclude that holistically, we can say that the productivity in the organic system is either equal or lower than the conventional systems, depending upon what kind of crop you are using. If you have enough legumes who can produce their own nitrogen by assimilation from the atmosphere, then you have practically equal yields. But for other crops with high nitrogen demand, the yields are lower. But on the farmer fields, it's not that differentiable. They are performing more or less equal. And the organic farming systems offer higher returns on input costs and equivalent benefit cost ratio, and are less capital intensive, so more useful for the capital poor smallholders. And there are these environmental benefits from organic systems which are not widely considered in the policy making. So they need to be considered, and the farmers need to get appropriate compensation for these global services that they provide. With that, I would like to thank all of our partners in these 3 countries and the donors. Thanks to the long-term commitment of SDC, of Liechtenstein Development Service, of BioVision, and COPE Sustainability Fund, that this program is ongoing and it's expected to run further. And thanks to all these wonderful people, not only these, there are many other people who have been associated with this project, and they contributed to the success of this program. Thank you very much. And this year we released a synthesis report of the 12 years of the SysCom program. If you are interested in the findings from Kenya and Bolivia, please, this is freely available on this website of SysCom, systems-comparison.fipl.org. Thank you very much, and I thank all my people, colleagues, and partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kobi. Thank you for this presentation. And also thank you for bringing all this knowledge to market. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions from here, from the floor. If maybe, or is there any reaction?
Still typing.
Okay, so any question from the floor? Yes?
Can you say something about the ratio organic, non-organic in those regions that they work in?
In central India, for cotton, if you take 95% of the cotton is BT cotton in India. Only, let's say, 3 to 4% is certified organic. But still, India is the largest producer of organic cotton. In some years, it's China, but historically, India has been the largest producer. And this central India, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, this region is the region where they produce mostly organic. And there are quite some organic farmers in this area. Yeah. The challenge is the marketing of other associated crops. So cotton in India is in this very nice value chain. It reaches through COPE Natura line here, but the other crops they produce, these farmers, they are mostly sold in the open market at the conventional price. There need to be better marketing solutions for that.
Any other question from here? And from No? Yes, Christoph? And then, yeah.
You have shown now results from India, this particular cropping system. How does it look in Kenya? Do you have similar results in?
Well, thank you. So I think I need to repeat the question. I forgot. So the question is about how is the situation looking in Kenya? In Kenya, it varies with the crops. For maize, it looks very good. So the organic high input there could come up to the same levels of yield and much higher returns. But for the vegetables, it looks terrible because of the pest attack. So now colleagues in Kenya are addressing these pest issues since last 2 years, let's say, and hopefully it will improve.
Okay, thank you. First you, and then the last question from the.
I would be interested in stability of these different systems, in changing climate and changing prices, economic prices, gold prices. So I guess when you say at the end, every system has more or less the same ratio in input-output, they are more or less equal, but I would expect the organic systems to be more stable against climate change, and also to be less dependent on economic changes on the big business.
Thank you. So the question is that if the organic systems are more stable or for against climate changes and market changes. The market is a big influencer. I mean, we have been pushing since long that there should be system-based premiums. I mean, at the moment, farmers are getting premium price for the organic cotton, which is very tiny proportion of the final organic that you get in the market. So, but they, I mean, that is for the product that they produce, not for the system they follow and not for the ecosystem services. That is a drawback. If that would be there, the organic system would be financially more stable and less dependent on these fluctuations. For instance, in this region, many farmers are switching from cotton to chickpeas because chickpea is giving good price. But that is year to year, like huge variation. 2 years, very high price, everybody grows chickpeas, then goes down. For the climate resilience, yes, organic systems are in theory more resilient. The conventional systems, they are based on this hypothesis that when there is need for water, it will be available. When there is need for nutrition, it will be available. If these things do not work, then the system does not work. So, and the organic systems are based on this uncertainty of the climatic and inputs, so they are more stable. But certainly they contribute less to GDP. So as long as our economic system runs on the hypothesis that there should be certain % of contribution to the GDP by agriculture, then the conventional system is best. Because, you know, if there is more poisoning even, and then there is more work for the doctors, more work for pharmaceuticals, more work for the whole GDP is running better. So, I mean, that's
okay, good. I think we keep it here. Alas, the question from remote.
One question from Lindsay Norbrook, who wonders what the where the site exactly is of the trial and what the soil type, because of the earth densities, which were very high in the conventional plots. Earthworm density, sorry.
Yeah, so
you don't need to read that.
So the soil type is deep clay, black soils, cotton soils, very high clay content, and it's in central India, in Madhya Pradesh state, Nimar Valley, close to the Narmada River. So yeah, so in the conventional there is quite a significant earthworm compared to other places? I think that's what Lindsay wants to know. As I said, one reason is that there is also quite some input of organic material in conventional as well. Probably that addresses.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So let's then turn to the third speaker, and of this, we have about 20 minutes left, with 5 minutes, maybe we will be late, on the topic of agripreneurship by Hans Jör. I'm not sure, for most of you, you might know him, so it's very difficult to introduce somebody famous like Hans in this circle. Hans is, until recently, he was the corporate head of the agriculture at Nestle, and as such, he was responsible for providing technical and strategic leadership in the group's worldwide agricultural raw materials supply chain. But not only this, he is very active at the international side, in international organizations relating to international agriculture. In many of the main international bodies, he was serving either as a member of the board, as chair of the board, or in different other advisory functions. So we were happy to have you here, Hans. And the topic is agripreneurship, preparing future farmers around the globe.
Thank you.
And this is the magical thing, so you press on the right.
On the right-hand side, yes. So very good afternoon to all of you, and also those who are following us on the screen. I'm very happy to be here and to share some thoughts with you. And I also have to tell you that I'm extremely pleased to what I have seen and heard this afternoon, that you and many of the presenters are clearly now on what I call the nexus of agriculture, nutrition, and health. And this is the purpose of the food system. A logical thing, but 20 years ago, nobody was talking about those ideas. And I think nutrition, as we have seen in the first presentation down in the aula, is really about health, our health as individual health, but also the way we use natural resources to have a healthy environment and a healthy ecosystem. But we were talking today mainly about research, development, strategy, implementation, contributing to feed the world. But my main question was always, who is really feeding the world? Who is feeding the world? You? Are you feeding the world? Myself? No, not so much. But the farmers, if we do not have the farmers on this world, we don't need an industry, we don't need the input industry, we don't need the transformation industry. It's about the farmers. And it goes mainly into what Melanie said, what Bulwer said. It's about education and training those people who are really feeding the world. And we have a problem. We have a problem with an overaging population. We have a problem with discontinuity, that people are leaving where they can, the rural areas, and are not staying. And I'm very provocative, but this has nothing to do, with the only discussion, conventional or organic. It has maybe to do with the cash flow, and not about the productivity, and not the price you pay. Do you have, and some of you are agricultural economists, do you have enough cash to survive and to have a living income to stay in business? Because I know many of those countries, and I have seen that in those countries, unfortunately, most of the smallholders, they are there by default. And not like you by choice, what you're doing in your life. And I think this is, from a Western world perspective, totally different if we go there, and see these kind of things. And that is really the reason why I myself, I have seen that on all my many trips, that really we have to concentrate in education and in putting also ideas of new values in the heads of these young people there. And I'm not talking about being a missionary, but showing them that there is really a life as a smallholder and also as a farmer, and to have a decent life, you know, that makes sense to continue in these jobs. And here I give you quickly an overview, simply, you know, what it means to work as a company like ours and Nestle on supplying and organizing raw materials intake from the farm level, from the farm gate to a factory level. And that means that we are active in about more than 40 countries and interacting today with something like 600,000, mainly and mostly smallholder farmers. And the interesting part here is about the training. What do we have here? Yeah. So look at that, you know, 500,000, 2020 it's a little bit more, but this is for me the most important part. Why do we do that? Because we need quality, because we need food safety issues, we need having access to the volumes and all those things, and you need this and can only get it if you have trained people. It's as simple as that. And why do we train so many people? Because nobody does it. So here we have a little bit of an idea where we have the biggest pain points in the world food system, that nobody takes action and is too much into this local training. And we have been out, you know, with many of the lectures now you have seen probably in the press about climate and about biodiversity. So the issue is now really to see, you know, what do you do if you do this agripreneurship training? And I can tell you there is about 22,000 young farmers below 45 degrees age of 35 years, ladies, a lot of lady farmers and men who are being trained as agripreneurs. And it's a very simple way forward, because it has to do also with succession on the farms. So you train these people to be enabled to take over the farms and to grow eventually the farms. So the program is composed of 3 pillars: the future farmer, the future farm, and the conducive or the environment to make that happen. So it's a very simple way forward. And what is the future farm? This is like in a startup, you look into what you do for the future. You have 10 cows. Can you survive in 10 cows in 10 years from now? Or do you need 15, or do you need 50, or whatever? So you design, like a startup, the future stage of your farm. And then you look into the gap of knowledge, and then you train the individual with that knowledge she or he gains to make it happen. And then that is the program of the future farmer. And then you have World Banks, then you have NGOs who are helping us. So we cannot do that alone, but we have some funds, and that is the way forward to make sure that you have ensured supply of quality and safe products delivered for the future. And we are addressing clearly now a lot of topics like sequestration of carbon in soil. So we go with this concept also of regenerative agriculture already for 2-3 years, biodiversity stewardship on farms, and also at landscape level, as Melanie said. We have clearly seen that the farming boundaries is not enough just to see, you know, what you do and to have just a crop rotation. No, you have to think about landscape, and you have to think about communities. Why? Because these people who are engaging in these farming communities, normally they are the smartest ones. And they do that because they have a choice. And once you have a choice, then these people, they have a purpose. And normally they are becoming community leaders. And these community leaders, they can really make a change. Not we, not you, not the company like Nestle can do that change. It's themselves. And if they have the purpose, they have the value set, then it may happen. I just take you quickly through, because I'm already running out of time. You know, this is happening if you have the disadvantage of being the last speaker. But anyhow, here you see, you know, so this is the impact chain, how it may work when you run this program with about 700, 800 people from Nestle plus 500 NGO specialists, because we need this local knowledge to help us on those supply chains, because we don't have this knowledge in Malaysia, in Myanmar, in Thailand, in Brazil, in Russia, you name it, in this more than, as I said, 40 countries. And then you have, and I will not, I think, is the presentation being distributed so you can read and you come back if you have. So you see what we need is definitely also to work with the local universities and technological colleges, you name it. And here we are very, very much now pushing into digital learning. It's very interesting, you know, that really the tool has become mainly in Africa the most important tool, you know, digital television, less, and radio even less, but now we have a lot of coverage of telephone connections, and that is what I call the digital infrastructure. And where we do that, you know, we start also, as you see, internally. This is the internal way to do it, and then here, this is the gray part, is how you interact and what are the tools and what is the methodology you're using to make that happen. But even as a Nestle, you're too small to make the impact. And that's the reason why we have to engage with much more people around the globe and with very, very, very many local organizations. The main one is the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform. Just a question to you, have you ever heard about this organization here? Who has heard about this organization? Hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an initiative that has been created 20 years ago, where 130 companies of the food industry and trade are disseminating worldwide good agriculture practices with a kind of a standard or benchmark we have learned with an organization here in Switzerland, and with professors from this organization here, IP Suisse. And this was the ground base, you know, really to go out, and where we have now really this kind of impact worldwide. So thank you to the organization. Thank you also to Peter. You know what has been done, but it's this organization who was really helping us to make a big effort on that side. Then we have to make sure that we compile this information and we continuously share that in-house with our peers, but also externally. So on these different platforms, there's a lot of learning materials being generated and being sent out to the markets. And we give that out. This is like a recipe. You know, at the beginning, a lot of people said, well, why do you give that out as a recipe? I said, do you know Bocuse? Who knows Mr. Bocuse? The very important French cook. One, not the young one, well, unfortunately he passed away, but I said, look guys, why can't you buy all the recipes and the nice books from Mr. Bocuse? You're not Mr. Bocuse if you just go in your kitchen and you try to do what he has done. You know, there is a lot of things what you can share in life, and you still have a competitive advantage doing that and helping other people. Anyhow, so this is a little bit the roadmap of what we do. And, you know, there are these questions out there. What do you have to achieve in 2050? I am of the clear opinion that we have to make sure that we have, before 2050, a clear milestone and a target to achieve. And this has been nailed down with the agripreneurs, and we are counting with agripreneurs to really make this transformational change we need in the world production system. That is for sure. But we cannot do that with flimsy PowerPoint presentations. We have to do that with the young and talented farmers. And I would conclude, to be more or less on time, in a very speedy way, summary. Because I'm not sure if are the films. Melanie, may I ask you a question? Are the films working or not?
Yes.
Then let's at least quickly have an insight to what has been done, that you have an idea, you know what I'm talking about in Pakistan. And then I will conclude in a verbal way.
पाकिस्तान की दही तरक्की में ख़वातीन का हमेशा बहुत अहम किरदार रहा है। नेस्ले ने भी विमेन एम्पावरमेंट को और विमेन एग्रीप्रेन्योर को हमेशा इनकरेज किया है। इसी चीज़ को देखते हुए मैं भी आगे बढ़ी। हमारे इलाके में गैर आबाद रकबा था, उसको आबाद किया और वहाँ पर ख़वातीन के लिए एक ट्रेनिंग सेंटर कायम किया और उनको ऐसे मौक़े फ़राहम किए जिससे वो तरबियत भी हासिल कर सकें और रोज़गार का मौका भी उन्हें मिल सके। इस सिलसिले में मैं नेस्ले की इंतहाई मशकूर हूँ, जिन्होंने इस फार्म को डेवलप करने में टेक्निकल असिस्टेंस हर स्टेप पे प्रोवाइड की है।
So a very short one, you know, this is not about going only with the big corporations and doing with big companies. We're sourcing from many hundreds of thousands of smallholders, because in many countries where the factories are located, they are not big farms, and that is good like this. Anyhow, what I wanted to conclude is really to focus, and please focus also here at this institution, in this school, about living income. Because living income is about lifestyle. And you only retain young, talented people once you offer them or you enable them to have the lifestyle they really want to have. And this is not about polarizing on this or that, or regenerative, sustainable agriculture, organic, etc., IP. This is not the issue. It is about, are they enabled to produce what the market is looking for, and where they do not have the highest price, but the highest margin, or what I call a free cash flow. This is the right thing to look at. And then the next step is also to look into, do they use natural resources in a way that they do not pollute, that they do not destroy, and that they really continue to take care of soil health and biodiversity as such. And this is, for me, the prerequisite to have a food system elaborated where you have the younger generation now taking care of all those things. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just very wide. Maybe there's one or two questions. Yes, please.
You expected the agripreneurs to share their knowledge, and entrepreneurs are not expected to share their knowledge because it's business secrecy. So
No.
how do you expect the farmers to share it?
No, this is the wrong assumption. Well, this is the wrong assumption. I tell you, people who are making good efforts in quality and in getting prices and being remunerated in a fair way, they tell their colleagues what to do to get more cocoa on their trees. They share how they feed the cow to get more milk. This is interesting. It's a different dynamic. We are not in the startup stories here in Europe and things like that, you know, in technology and IPOs and all these things. This is a totally different environment. We see that these people, they share, because then they are becoming, as I said, community leaders. Because if you keep your cards very close to your chest, you will never ever become a community leader. And this is not what we nurture. Okay?
Yes, another short question from Rio? No?
Think about Bocuse.
Yes, no, here from very close.
Yeah. But think about Bocuse. Why do we write? You get all those things, you get all the recipes also from this platform. Yes, Melanie.
Well, thank you. I think it's very important what you say about how there's a cascading effect between the lighthouse farmers. I was wondering, how do you select, or how do you find the future agripreneurs?
Oh, we we went through very, very academical approaches on that, until I said, let's go out and to talk to people. And then you are asking farmers who is doing this and that. And here, you know, it's mainly through the value system and the recognition in communities out there, and not from the Western inside, who qualifies to come to Zollikofen and who has to do this. But it's the very most important question, because if you do not have a kind of a good selection, then you have missed the heart. So the selection is the issue, is this endpoint. If you make that the right choice, then you're okay. And you create a lot of loyalty. That is also very extremely important there. Okay?
Okay, Hans. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving us the challenge to summarize your very lively presentation afterwards in about 15 minutes. I don't know how I will do that, but great presentation. Thank you very much.